I have given you a land for which you did not labor, and cities which you did not build, and you dwell in them. You eat of the vineyards and olive groves which you did not plant. Now therefore fear the Lord, serve him in sincerity and in truth, and put away the gods which your fathers served on the other side of the river and in Egypt served the Lord. And if it seems evil to you to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the river, or the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord.
Good morning, family. How wonderful it is having everybody here. Today is our friend and family day, and it's nice seeing all of you that are visiting with us today. And it's nice seeing some who haven't been able to be here for a while, my brother Patrick and my sister Dolores. And I tell you what, it's just enough, just put a smile on everybody's face. We are going to be having a cookout later on after Bible class. I hope all of you are able to stay, and we're just going to be a nice thing where we're going to have some hot dogs and some baked beans and watermelon and just a bunch of good stuff. So I'm hoping you're able to stay for that. It's going to be a nice time to get to know each other and visit with each other a little bit. And I'm especially glad to have everybody here today because it's a special day. Our elders, I'm always so proud of them, has seen fit to have a marriage and family enrichment seminar. And I tell you what, we need that. Every one of us, there's no one here who can't prosper by hearing lessons about our family and marriages. And so I'm so thankful that they have put this on, and I'm so thankful that Larry Krause is our speaker. He has done such a wonderful job this whole weekend, and for those of you who have been here for all the lessons, I know you have been so blessed, and I appreciate all the kind compliments that you've given. If you haven't been able to be here for all of those, all of our lessons are being recorded either on CD or videotape, and let me encourage you to make sure you listen to them. I have listened to them, and they have done me a lot of good this weekend, and I know they will do you a lot of good also. Larry is a preacher at the Katanning Church of Christ in Pennsylvania. He's been a friend of mine, I guess, for about 30-some years. He knew me when my hair was dark, and he's not the reason that it's not dark any longer. I blame that on my kids, you know, and my dad and mom and my wife and the elders. So, and it's different elders. I blame it on them wherever I've been. But Larry is he's a man of God. He loves the Lord with all of his heart. He loves his family, and he seeks to live exactly what he preaches. I've always appreciated Larry. I've always admired him. And you will be blessed, as I am, to listen to him as he encourages us to build up strong families. And without taking any more of his time, I introduce to you Larry Krause.
Well, it's great to be here at Canton. I can't say enough how I've really enjoyed this. You are a great and wonderful church, every single one of you. I really enjoyed visiting with Denver and Thelma Moore for a few minutes this morning. And they had been married for 70 years. Isn't that amazing? And I'm thinking, you know, Denver ought to be the guy up here giving this lesson. So Stephen asked him, we asked, Denver, what's the secret to this success? He says, watch and pray. So, I mean, just totally amazing. I've enjoyed being with every one of you. And Jim, I just think the world of you. I just wish I could just hang around here and tap into your brain. I mean, wow, the intelligence and just amazing. And then being with Harry, I mean, wow. I mean, and Harry, I mean, it's just amazing how he can sit there and figure you out, and he can, I mean, it's just amazing. I just enjoy being with everybody, and I think about all the great preachers that we have in this church that you guys have. You know, with John, and then with Lance and Bill Craddock and Steve. I mean, just a wonderful congregation you are. And I just enjoy being with you. And I love this topic. You know what? I might be, I mean, I hate to see this come to an end. I just love talking about family. I can talk about family all day, all month. And I just love talking about families. And you know that our family today is being under attack. Now I got to find my remote. It's in here somewhere. It's in one of these bars. But, well, there's the keys. There's the phone. There's the wallet. There's not much in it. Okay, here it is. Now, this here is actually, this is a shock collar. You know, if I go over time, they're gonna push the button. But you know, I just love talking about families, and our families, though, today are being under attack. I mean, there's so many things that's happening to our family. We're being attacked in every which way. You know, Satan's out to get our kids. You know, they're coming at us from the social media, from music and videos and all these things. And so our family is being under attack. So the question is, you know, what can we do to have strong families? And, you know, and some of us, you know, I remember in growing up, you know, my mom and dad, they were married for 72 years. And there were 10 of us counting mom and dad. But, you know, my mom, I always tell everybody, you know, I think about growing up. I had the most wonderful childhood. That's why I love family, love talking about family. My growing up was nothing but pure fun. I mean, it was fun. I had a great mom and dad. My mom was about as good as anybody could ever be. My mom never ever said a curse word her entire life. My mom had never ever tasted tobacco. She had never tasted alcohol. When she married my dad, she was only 16 years old, and he was the only boyfriend that she ever had. I couldn't have had a better mom. But I'm going to tell you, my dad was complete. He wasn't the same as my mom. He was good, but he had an alcohol problem. And I can remember in growing up that my mom would have to go up and get my dad out of the bar. And I remember all the fighting that took place in our house. And I remember my mom getting so stressed out, you know, trying to take care of all of us kids while my dad was up in the bar. And I remember she would sometimes run out of the house crying and run down through this place that we had called Dutch Bottom. That was like the sort of like with the slum area of our town. And then I can also remember my mom having to go up into the bar and trying to get my dad out of the bar. But in 1969, my sister went to a vacation Bible school. And after that vacation Bible school, the preacher came down and visited with us. And we all became Christians on June the 17th, 1969. You know, It's amazing what God can do. You know, in Ephesians chapter 2, God says that you were dead in your trespasses and in your sins. But what did God do? He said he had quickened you and he had made you alive. And my dad became alive on June the 17th, 1969. He never ever touched another drop of alcohol ever again. Our house became like a permanent vacation home. There was no more fighting. There was no more fussing. There was joy. There was peace. There was contentment, all because we had a new member of the family, and his name was Jesus. And Jesus will give you a strong home. Jesus will give you a home that is out of this world. We just got to invite him in and let him come in and let him stay. But I like us to think this morning, if we have time, you know, I can go, like I said, all day. I want us to think about some habits. You know, we all have habits, right? We're all creatures of habits. You know, I get up the same time, go to bed the same time. You know, we all get in habits. And there are good habits and there are bad habits. There are habits we need to get rid of. My dad got rid of those bad habits and he developed some good ones. And so strong families have good habits. And so I would like us to think a little bit this morning, some good habits that we can develop in our families, that we can become strong. And so in Joshua 24, you know, in verse 13, you know, Joshua is coming towards the end of his life. And you think about all the years that they had spent in the wilderness, then coming to the land of Canaan and conquering the land of Canaan. And Joshua says, look how much God has blessed you. God has given you cities that you have not built. God has given you vineyards that you have not planted. And then he says, what will you do? And he said, for me and my household, this is what we're going to do. We are going to serve the Lord. And so God has blessed us. He has blessed us with good children. He has blessed us with good mates, and he has blessed us in a great country. With all of our problems and things that we're dealing with, we still have a great country. And then I think about all the wonderful blessings that we have in Jesus. And so we need to tell ourselves and ask ourselves, who am I going to serve? Let's decide we're going to serve the Lord. And so what are some good habits? Number one, there needs to be discipline. You know, I remember when I was growing up, you know, I remember, you know, if you have 8 kids, you got to have what? If you don't have discipline, what do you got? You got a bunch of Marines in an army barracks someplace with nothing to do. You're in deep, deep trouble. And so there's got to be discipline. And my dad, he believed in discipline. I can remember one time my mom went to slap me. And I went like that, and she missed. She went to slap me again, and I went like that, and she missed again. My dad stepped in, and he didn't miss. And he said to me, he said, Larry, I'm going to tell you something. That's my wife. And you will not dishonor my wife. She is your mother. And when I was doing this and doing that to him, it was the same as if I was hitting my mom. My dad believed in discipline. And we need to have discipline in our homes. Discipline is a good thing for us. It's good for us. And I know that sometimes there are people that are very harsh. And then there's some who practice no discipline at all. I can remember another time when I was 16 years old, I called my dad on because, I'm 16 now. I had my own car, I had a job, and I was a man. And I said, I challenged my dad. I challenged him. And I hate to say it, I even feel bad about it today. I called him an old man. He said, okay, son, let's get the boxing gloves on. And my dad used to be an amateur boxer. And we boxed all the time. But I didn't realize that he was always letting me win. So we got out there in the yard, and I gave him everything I got. And boy, he just like I wasn't even. And then whang, just straight out of nowhere. I laid on the ground, and like a dummy, I kept on getting back up. And bang, went down I went. And I can remember going in and trying to work my jaw loose. But I grew up that day. But discipline is a good thing. And of course, in our families, with our children, everybody's different. Some kids are real sensitive, so you gotta watch how you discipline. I can remember, later on when we talk about, I have a son. He's now a preacher, but he was very active. He was colic. They say preachers' kids are the worst kids. Sorry, Steve. You know what? That's really true. My kid, he was the worst kid. I can remember one time he thought he was Superman, and he actually went through the church wall. He went through the wall. It was just drywall with no support behind it, and it actually looked like you'd see on a cartoon. It looked like a human being went through there. It was the outline of a person. He just did everything. And so so one day I said to him, Isaiah, I'm going to give you two choices. I could give you a spanking, or you're going to be grounded. Which one do you want? Which one do you think he chose? He says, give me the spanking. And you know what I said? I said, you're grounded. So Diane said that was a low blow. But discipline is good for us. And so in Proverbs 22 and verse 15, it says, foolishness bounds up in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction drives it far from him. And then the other thing is learn how to manage your money. And I think, even with our kids, we need to learn how to manage money. I oftentimes think, if we could take some of these moms. Wow. My mom, my dad worked at Anchor Hawk and Glass. He was a blue-collar worker. And supporting 10 people on a little small salary, factory salary. I'm thinking my mom had to be a financial genius. And I'm thinking some of these mothers, and I know we got some here, that have managed their house on a small income. But wouldn't it be great if we had these mothers in charge of the government? Wow, how much difference that would make. But we need to learn how to manage money, or learn how to manage what we have on a small income. I remember growing up, my dad would buy, I learned how to drive a car it was a 58 Plymouth DeSoto that my dad paid $15 for. And then I also remember, we would go out and buy everything used. When it would break down, we'd go to the junkyard, and my job was always to hold the brake so we could take all the parts off and all that. But if we could just learn to manage our money, because a lot of families are hurting because they don't know how to manage on the little that they have. And a lot of times we don't have to have all the fancy stuff. We don't have to have all the fancy trimmings. We can go with a little bit that we've got. And then let me back up here. Learn sharing responsibilities in the home. I can remember when I was a kid, one of the things I was responsible for was to cut the grass and take out the garbage. Here I am 60 years later, still taking out the garbage and cutting the grass. Everybody needs to have some kind of sense of responsibility. And and when you have a bunch of kids, I know that even if you don't, even just have a couple, there's got to be responsibilities. And what happens is when kids take on responsibilities and they take on these different chores, they begin to feel a sense of what? What happens when you begin to take on responsibilities? You feel a sense of what? Sense of belonging, right? This is my family. You know, I belong here. And I'm sharing in some of these responsibilities. So take on those different chores. And then, of course, I guarantee you, you know, Denver and Thelma, 70 years of marriage, you think they ever went through any kind of adversity? I guarantee you that anybody that's been married for any length of time, any families that's been together any length of time have dealt with adversity. We all have to deal with adversity. And so in Proverbs 24 and verse 10, if you faint in adversity, your strength is small. And so when we go through problems, when we go through difficulties, let's be ready to deal with it. Be ready to face adversity. Be able to cope with it. I mean, there's all kinds of things that can happen in our homes, and it does happen, but we got to be able to deal with adversity. Another, I think a great thing is another habit we need to develop in our home is just being kind to each other. You know, out there in the world is mean, it's rough, it's tough. Sometimes, people aren't very nice. I can remember when my son was in school, when he was in about second or third grade, he had a teacher who didn't like him. I mean, she was just, I don't know why, but she would belittle him. She would do terrible things. I had meetings with her, but you know, there are times that this world is pretty tough. And I can remember Isaiah says, hey, Dad, why don't we go on vacation? Every day he wanted to go on vacation instead of going to school. And then I met with the principal. I thought about taking him out, and I said, well, no, you know what? I want him to realize that in life, there are difficult people you have to deal with. You can't get away from difficult people. Sometimes they're on your jobs. They're just there. And sometimes the world is pretty tough. And so what our kids need, when all this happens, they need our support. And they need to be treated with kindness. And so we need to be kind to each other. And so in Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 32, he says, be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, even as what? As Christ has forgiven you. Now, one of the things I don't have up here on the slide is that one there. And I would say the biggest need for, to have strong families, one of the things we need is forgiveness. I don't have that up there, but we need it. When we mess up, when our kids mess up, we need to have forgiveness. And I mean, when you talk about forgiveness, that means you don't bring it up anymore. And so be kind, be tenderhearted, and be forgiving. And then develop some good family activities. There are, in growing up, when you have these family activities, wow. I can remember Mom and Dad, when we were growing up, we could go to the drive-in. We'd always go to drive-in movies. And you could go to a drive-in movie, $1 a carload. So, we went every Friday night. And I can remember Mom making sticky rolls, and she would make popcorn, and we would take our blankets and we'd lay out in front of the car, and she'd make homemade lemonade. I mean, it was the greatest thing every Friday night. And now, I'd love to go see a drive-in movie. And then I have this old shed. I got a shed we built, and everything in it's from the 50s. And you know what I got in there, don't you? I got some old drive-in speakers in there, and I got movie posters because, you know why? Because I remember those great activities that we had with Mom and Dad. And also, I remember the picnics. We would have picnics. I can remember we'd go to this place called Indian Creek, and Dad would pitch for both sides because we had 4 boys and 4 girls. And so Dad we'd play kickball, and he'd be a pitcher for both sides. I mean, and we had these wonderful family activities. So good, strong families do stuff together. Think of things that you can do that will stick with your kids till the day they die. Develop good family activities. Another thing, you remember the good old days when we all ate together? I can remember we'd be outside playing and Mom would yell, "Dinner's ready!" And what we all do, man, we all come running, right? Because we ate together. There's just something about when we sit down at the kitchen table and we eat together. You know, what does eating together do? You know, even with the church. You know, we're going to have this fellowship dinner afterwards. It's not, what does it do? What? It pulls us together. It helps us to bond. You know, when I have when a person's having a problem, or if I'm having a difference with somebody, you know what I do? I say, let's go out and eat. Or why don't you come on over to the house? We're going to have dinner together. Because what happens? Regardless of all of our problems, regardless of all of our differences and all the things that we're dealing with, just being able to get together and we eat together, it forms a bond. And I think that's why when Paul wrote to the church at Corinth about some people not to eat with, because we feel there's a bond that we form. And so families, it's good to sit down and eat together. And then express love. You know, we need to be telling people how much we love them. And I can't tell you how important that is. Not just in our words, but also in our actions. When I was growing up, my dad never, ever, I never heard my dad tell me that he loved me. Never, ever heard those words. Except when I was going to Russia, and he thought I wasn't coming back. When I was going to Russia, he gave me a big hug, and he kissed me, and he said, "Son, I just love you." And that's the first time I heard my dad say he loved me. But you know what? There was never a moment in my life that I ever questioned my dad's love. Never entered my mind. I knew that my dad loved my mom. I knew my mom loved my dad. And I'm going to tell you, we had the greatest security. You know, when you have people that love each other, you know what that does? That builds up security and self-esteem. And you know, and what our kids need right now, they need self-esteem. They need to be able to say no to the world. They need to be strong enough to say no to all the temptations that's out there. And the only way they can do that is they need to know that they are worthwhile. And how do we feel whether we're worthwhile or not? It comes from our home. You know, how does your wife know that she's worthwhile? It comes from a husband that says, "I love you." And not only in words, but also in his actions. I can remember my dad, he would work all night. And he would get home at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I'd be standing there at the door waiting for my dad to come home. And we always liked to swim. And so we'd go down to the river. And my dad would come home. He was so tired and so wore out. I said, "Dad, let's go down to the river." And you know what? He never said no. We always went to the river. And I remember when I played football, we used to have our football games on Saturday morning. And my dad would come home at 8 o'clock in the morning, and you know what? He never missed not even one football game. My dad and I, we loved to hunt and fish. I'd be waiting there at 8 o'clock in the morning when he got home. I'd have my hunting clothes all on, all ready to go. He was tired and wore out, but we hunted all day. But you know, so I never ever questioned my dad's love. It was displayed in his actions. And then I think the love that he had for my mom had for all of us. My mom only ever had one dress, just one dress. And she sacrificed everything for us. She gave everything. And so the love, just unbelievable. And so I'd like to encourage you to express your love for each other. You remember what Jesus said to his disciples? Remember in John chapter 13, we get down and wash their feet? Remember what they were doing there? They were fussing at the table, right? Remember, there's one place you don't fuss is where? At the table, right? And what were they fussing about? Who's going to be the greatest, right? Can you imagine if Jesus allowed that to go on? Can you imagine what would have happened in Acts chapter 2 when all those disciples get together and they're still fussing about who's going to be the greatest? But what did Jesus do? Jesus got down, he took off his jacket, right? And he got down and he washed all of their feet, every single one of them. You know, I'll tell you what, you would not want to wash my feet. You know, I got the ugliest feet that you've ever imagined. I got corns. You know, I got everything on them. You know, I used to think when we went and got shoes, I always thought I took an 8.5. And one day we were at the shoe store and Diane was trying to find a pair of shoes. And I thought, well, maybe not here. I found out I'd take a size 10. So I was wearing an 8.5 shoe. You know what happens if you wear an 8.5 shoe? If you take a size 10? Well, you know what your toes going to look like after a while? That's what I got. So I got the ugliest feet. Not only that, they stink, they smell. And you know what? Jesus, what did he do? He got down and washed his dirty feet. They smelled like fish. But why did he do it? Because he loved them. And then what did he say? He says, you love each other as what? As I have loved you. And so we need to have that kind of love. And you can imagine what that will do to our homes if we can express that kind of love for one another. And then, here's the real key to building a strong home. Make Jesus the glue of your family. I'll tell you what. My dad, I remember we were driving down the road one day, and we were talking about the way things were at one time. My dad acted like he never ever drank a drop of alcohol. I said, hey, Dad, come on. I said, you know what? I was just a little guy, but I remember, Dad. I remember. But he never even wanted to think about it. He's changed his life so much that it was like he never ever done it. And if you would see my dad, I mean, wow. My dad, I remember my dad was always... my dad was like, you know, he was a fighter. He was fought with General MacArthur. He was in the South Pacific. He was an amateur boxer. Anyhow, I remember one day my sister had a boyfriend come over one day, and no, it was her husband. They were married. But anyhow, they come in, and he was telling me about, boy, your dad, he's so humble. He's just the sweetest little guy. I mean, I said, yeah. I said, let me tell you, he looks sweet. He is sweet, but I'm going to tell you, there was a time that he was not so sweet. and my dad would have a temper. He had like a little vein that would pop up above his eyebrow, and when that vein would pop out, you know you went to the place of no return. And I said, and he said to me, he said, your dad looks like he would never harm or flee. I said, believe me, there was a time that my dad would harm and flee. But what happened? Jesus came into his life, and Jesus changed my dad's life. And he was kind and sensitive, caring, moral, godly, disciplined. He had all these things because Jesus was a part of his life. I'm going to tell you what made our family great is that Jesus held it all together. Now, my mom, like I said, she was always an angel. But we, you know, growing up when I was real little, we didn't go to church that much, really weren't Christians, didn't know anything about the Bible. But you know what? I can remember my mom. I can remember sitting on my mom's lap and my mom singing hymns to me. And when the day when my dad and mom died, they died within 6 months of each other. They were married for 72 years. And all of us kids, we all circled around the bed. And we sang for 5 hours to Mom and Dad until Dad breathed his last breath. And then here were his last words. Last words. My dad was trying to gulp for some air. And he's trying to talk. And I put my ear down inside my dad's mouth to try to hear what he was saying. His last words, "I love you and all." Those were my dad's very last words. He took his last breath and he died. Christianity will make a difference in your home. It will give you a home that's paradise on earth. You remember the thief hanging on the cross? And as Jesus was suspended between heaven and earth, what did Jesus talk to the thief about? Talked about paradise. How in the world can you talk about paradise when you got nails that are driven through your hands and nails driven through your feet and the blood coming down? How can you talk about paradise? I'm going to tell you, no matter what problems you encounter, no matter what adversity you face in your home is paradise. Even when you're hanging on the cross, if Jesus is there, it's paradise. He'll make your home a place of paradise. And so let's build on prayer and Bible study. And so think about the foundation of our homes. Our homes are being under attack. And you remember Jesus in Matthew chapter 7 talked about the foolish man and the wise man, right? And the foolish man built his house where? He built his house upon the sand, right? And the wise man built his house on what? He built it on rock. It was on a solid foundation. And what happened? The rains came down, right? The home was being attacked. The rain's coming down. And the waters were coming up. And the wind was beating on the house. It was being attacked from every side. But what happened? Well, when your house is being attacked from every side and you don't have Jesus as a foundation of your home, what's going to happen to that house? It is going to fall. But if you have Jesus Christ as the foundation of your house and of your home, when the rains come and the floods come up and the winds blow, it doesn't matter because your house is founded on the rock, and that is Jesus Christ. So to build strong homes, we got to build on Jesus. And so maybe here this morning, it's got to start where we are. You can be a better child. You can be a better son. You can be a better daughter. You can be a better husband. You can be a better wife. It all begins with Jesus. If you want to be a better wife, be a Christian. You want to be a better son, be a Christian. And so I'd like to encourage you, we can be dead in our sins. You know what it means to be dead? That means we're walking around. How many of you ever seen The Night of the Living Dead? You ever see that movie? Okay, I remember when I was a little kid. I was about 7 or 8 years old when it came out in black and white. I went to the movie theater, watched The Night of the Living Dead, and I ran home when I come out because it was dark. Because you see all them zombies walking around, right? And you know what? When God looks at us, what are we? What's the thing? They got that movie out, or that series called The Walking Dead, right? Here we are. We're walking around. We're the walking dead. But you know what God can do? He can bring you back to life. He can take you from being a zombie and bringing life to you. And it all begins by obeying the gospel of Jesus Christ. And Jesus says, you believe in me. He said, if you don't believe in me, he says, you will do what? You will die in your sins. John 8 and verse 24. And Luke 13, verses 3 and 5. Jesus tells his disciple, or tells the people to come and ask him a question, says it twice. He says, you need to what? Nay, except you repent, you shall all likewise what? Perish. If we don't make the changes, not just before we're baptized, but forever. We ought to be constantly changing, constantly moving, and constantly growing. And there's things that we see that we're messing up in our lives, and we're messing up. I'm going to change. I'm going to do better. Repentance. Forever. Because you believe in Jesus, because you love him. So you want to change. And then you believe in him and you love him so much that you're willing to confess Jesus as the Son of God. To your children, to your wife, to your grandchildren, to your grandparents, to your cousins, to all your friends, and even in a world that seems like it's antagonistic towards Jesus Christ. But you say, you know what? I believe. I believe. And Jesus says, if you confess me before men, I'll confess you before my Father which is in heaven. And then he says, in John chapter 3, and verse 3 through 5, Jesus said, except the man be born of water and the Spirit, he cannot what? He cannot enter the kingdom of God. So you want to become a part of God's family. This is where it all starts. And so you're born into it, born into it. And so when you're baptized, it's a beginning, not the end. It's the beginning of a new way of life. You really don't join the church. You're just born into it. You don't join the family. I didn't wake up one day and say, hey, Mom, I want to be a part of the family. No. We're born into it. And so this morning, if you're somebody here that has never obeyed the gospel of Jesus Christ, or if you're somebody here that needs the prayers of the church, you know, we're all in this thing together. We're all in the same boat. We're all wrestling with the same stuff. And we need each other's prayers. If you need to come, why don't you come us together as we stand and as we sing?